Hello, everyone. I'm Sam Eckmann of Gold Derby, here with Matt Aitken from the Eternals visual effects supervisor from Weta Digital. And Matt, this film, it looks different than really any other Marvel film in the MCU that we've seen so far. That largely has to do with Chloe Zhao's style, her directorial style that she brings to it. And films need to have like these full, when you're dealing with big battles in the MCU, they need to have these fully CG shots usually. So how does her filmmaking style influence your work when you're coming in trying to match that?
Yeah, that's a really important, I think, distinction about the Eternals is that, and I've worked on a few Marvel films now. They're great fun to work on. They are very demanding projects, but good fun. But Chloe brought her visual style, which is naturalistic, long takes, often shooting towards the end of the day, golden hour, and as part of that, this film was shot on location to a much greater extent than other Marvel films that I've worked on, which typically have a big studio backlot set kind of component. So that meant that we traveled, we shot on location in England, and we were in the Canary Islands off the west coast of the Sahara for about a month, shooting the end battle, which was a big component of Weta Digital's work on the show. Weta FX, I should say, because we're in the process of changing our name. And I keep forgetting that. But you're right, it's a Marvel film, and as such, there's going to be a process of the visual effects team helping the filmmakers to fully realize the story that they want to tell, and part of that happens in post-production. And I think it's a strength of the Marvel films that they're able to keep elements of the story alive, and to keep refining the story that they're telling late into post-production. The films are incredibly successful, and I think they're very finely crafted films, and I think you see that. So we were obliged to do that kind of work that we typically do on a Marvel show, which is do a large component of the end battle as fully CG shots. And I think it was close to a half of the shots that we did in the end battle on the beach were either fully CG or predominantly CG. So the challenge for us was in making sure that we honored Chloe's visual style in doing that. And we had the plates that she had shot on the beach to match to. So we matched her camera style with our full CG shots. Interestingly, and this is something that Stefan Soretti, who was the visual effects supervisor on the Marvel side, when he first raised this with me, because this is really important to Stefan, this idea that we honor Chloe's style. And when he raised this idea with me that, going all the way back to Jaws, when filmmakers have shot on location, particularly on or near the sea, the sky is going to change all the time because they're just going to be shooting when they can. So the classic thing about Jaws is that from one shot to the next, it goes from a clear blue sky to a completely overcast day. And maybe people notice a bit, but it doesn't interfere with people's enjoyment of the film. And the same thing happened with the plates that the production shot, that Chloe and her team shot on the beach in the Canary Islands. The weather was changing from day to day, and they just had to get their material. They couldn't wait for consistent skies. So when we were doing the full CG shots, we mixed it up as well. We didn't have just one sky that was like, this is going to be the sky for the sequence. We looked at the range of different skies that were represented in the material that was coming, in the filmed elements, and had the same kind of level of variation. So that I wasn't sure that was going to work, but I actually think it works really well. It took some convincing from Stefan to get me signed on to that idea.
When I think of the final battle, and really the film as a whole, the elements, the elements of nature are very strong in this film. And in that final battle, you have the oceans rising and whirlpools and volcanic eruptions, and there's sand and dirt kicking up. in a scene that massive, is it difficult to, what's more difficult, getting something fantastic looking correct, like a energy blast from someone's hand, or, successfully creating a water effect that doesn't, really tricks the eye?
Yeah, in a way, they're sort of similar things. It's about making something that is not physically correct, or even achievable, feel plausible. Like, it's about believability as opposed to complete realism. And we did a lot of cheating of the scale around the large scale water and destruction effects when Tiamat is rising out of the ocean and the sea floor. The water simulations are created on a very large scale. They were some of the biggest water simulations we've ever created, and they took weeks and weeks to run on our render farm just to calculate. They were massive pieces of work, but they were still way cheated in terms of what would actually happen if a creature of that scale and that size did come out of the ocean floor. Then, I mean, I don't actually know what would happen. I think it would be it wouldn't be nearly as I don't think you'd even see what was going on. I think the air would just get filled with mist instantly, or something crazy like that. So we had to kind of craft a believability, something that would that would look correct for the story that the filmmakers wanted to tell, but still had a sense of the scale. The first shot we see when Tiamat first starts to make an appearance, the camera sort of dives under the ocean, and we see this view of the sea floor, this vast view of the sea floor, and the magma as the crust of the earth at the base of the ocean starts to crack. And in terms of the scale of our character, we're seeing for miles and miles underwater there. But obviously that's never going to happen, even in the best, most pristine Caribbean diving sites, you're only going to get maybe 100 yards or something. So massively cheated, but still hopefully in a way that tells the story and has a sense of scale and awe about it.
It does. When he kind of emerges, that celestial comes out of the earth, it almost looks like, again, going back to sort of the nature landscapes of this movie, like a mountain range is forming. It takes on a very earth, something we would recognize from Earth. Is that look kind of described in the script to you already, or how much room is there to play with that sort of thing?
The look of Tiamat was the parts of him that we get to see, and I think he is a he. He's kind of like got this gold, like he's somehow elementally made of gold, but he destroys the island as he comes up through it. So and he kind of replaces the island, so he becomes the environment that our characters end up having, like especially Circe and Icarus. They have their final showdown standing on Tiamat's palm, and we treated it as an environment. We know in terms of the teams that we had working on it, and the way that we approached it. Technically, he's a creature or a character, but the pipeline steps that we used were very much our environmental pipeline tools and processes because of his scale. So there's clouds, and there's where we see part of his finger or part of his thumb in the background. It's like, as you say, it's like a mountain range. So again, that was fantastic because it made it feel like he's huge. It just really helped play to the scale, and also created this very different kind of environment for that final confrontation between Circe and Icarus.
You mentioned gold before, and I was thinking of the way the Eternals' powers are sort of showcased. Is they're all kind of united in this gold energy that courses through them, through their costumes even, which kind of connects them in a way that we don't often see Marvel superhero teams, and again feels very natural. How did you sort of cement that look for those effects?
Yeah, that's something else that Stefan was very very keen on us achieving, and it's great to hear that you think that we did have some success there, because the individual powers are quite different for the different Eternals, but but Stefan and the filmmakers were very keen for it to feel like they were all coming from a single unifying source. So it was the same energy, but being used in different ways by the different Eternals. And so there are a couple of key things that we use to kind of unite the different energies. And one is that the color, and I think you touched on this, and that there's this kind of bright gold color that it was very finely tuned, and it could go to be slightly too green or slightly too orange, very, very carefully. So we did a lot of iterations on some shots, just getting that color right. But it also had to feel like both an energy and something that physical. So when Thena, manifests a different weapon with the energy, maybe a sword in a fight, say with Crow or with Icarus, if she clashes with Crow, there had to feel like there was a physical connection there. It couldn't just feel like, something that was made purely of energy. So it had to be on that side of the scale, but at the same time, it's called cosmic energy. It comes from a source of power within them. So there was a fine balance between those two aspects, the energy and the physicality. And the way that we kind of achieved that really was by using both our traditional prop, if you like, teams. So there was geometry, there was a model which had a shader. So it had a treatment that gave it a materiality that was quite metallic. But at the same time, our simulation teams were involved, and they were running simulations that had a really subtle kind of a particulate sizzle around the weapons, which we dialed in very carefully. But there was a sense that there was, like something other than just a pure metal going on. And then our compositing teams who have the ability to work in a lot of kind of flares and not so much glows, because they were very keen to avoid a kind of just an out kind of glowing thing for the energy. But we did little kind of chromatic flares and really subtly worked those treatments in the final stages of putting the shots together, which hopefully subtly helped to convey that energy aspect. And what's interesting about the weapons is all the cosmic energy effects across the board with the Eternals was that it was something that Steph and the production got us involved in quite early on, like even before the shoot, because they wanted to have an idea of what Thena's weapons looked like, what Ajax's cosmic healing looked like, Icarus's I-beams before the shoot, so that they could show these tests that we were working up to the actors. So that when they were performing the role, it wasn't like completely blind. They had an idea of what this was going to look like once it was worked up in post. So that was pretty helpful.
And when you have all these characters flying around with cosmic energy, I mean, I assume you have to use quite a few digital doubles along the way. And sometimes in movies, like, you can pick out when something's a digital double if a movement isn't quite right, if something is, something is off. Is it harder to get that accurate in a film that does use so many natural backgrounds versus like your Endgame battle, which is all, there's completely CGI created landscapes in there? Is it more difficult on a film like this?
Yeah, I mean, we say that the digital doubles, the high-end digital doubles, is the hardest stuff that we have to do. And we created Crow, the deviant, in his humanoid form for the battle with Thena at the end as well. And there's just a bit more latitude there because as an audience, we don't have anything to line Crow up to check how accurate he is. There's we can kind of just have some fun and riff on the fact that he's got 4 eyes or whatever. But when you're doubling your cast, then which we just have to do to some degree. It's not something that we say is the main part of the work that we do, but as you say, with CG shots, there's going to be a requirement to do that. It is the requirement is to get it right, as you say. So it is incredibly demanding, but it's something that we have a lot of experience in over the years. The digital human is a particular area of specialty of Weta effects. And we've got a great tool set that we've evolved over the years.
The Crow character is a really unique one because he sort of morphs from the traditional deviant that's sort of more of like a predator and animalistic character into a humanoid character. And I'm always wondering when working on a Marvel project, because that character model is quite different looking than his comic book counterpart. And I don't know if you've seen, but some comic book fans are very precious with their things they grew up with. Are you aware, is that pressure like weighing on you of like, oh, we're really taking this in a sort of different direction? How is this going to pan out?
I mean, I was aware how different Crow was from the comic book because I'm always going to go back and look at the comic book for inspiration. I mean, we just to deviate slightly from your question, for the cosmic energy, we looked very closely at the way Jack Kirby, he evolved this this graphic style for the Eternals, made up of sort of glyphs of circular and linear shapes, and we worked that into the cosmic energy for all the different Eternals. So there's very much a reference and an honoring of the comic book work, but I mean, we at the end of the day, we have to honor the story that the filmmakers want to tell, and they I guess they felt that Crow in the form that he was in the comics wouldn't tell the story that they wanted to tell in terms of how he related to the other deviants and this evolution of the deviants that was so important to the story, because it's like a ticking clock. It's if Crow is able to continue to draw energy off the deviant, off the Eternals that he kills, then how all powerful could he become? So we got a couple of pieces of concept art, key concept art from the Marvel concept art team, which really, broadly speaking, laid out Crow as he was going to look in the film. So that was very much our starting point. And then we had quite a lot of scope to continue to explore that within the boundaries of that concept art, particularly the look of his face. They didn't really have an idea of how human or animalistic his face was going to be. So we did a lot of exploration around that before we settled on the face that you see in the film.
Well, before I let you go, I have to, one thing that fascinates me about visual effects is that to me, it seems like a field that is sort of constantly evolving, like it'll never be done being refined and getting things more realistic. And you've been with Weta through different Marvel eras, like Iron Man 3, going back to that, but also, in the early days of Weta, like with the Lord of the Rings trilogy. So in thinking back to those early days of Weta and your work, what has surprised you? What has sort of evolved the most in your work?
There's been a few things because I'm long on the tooth and was there even before Lord of the Rings, when we were, there wasn't software to do cloth, so we had a character that was entirely cloth based. We had to sort of write that software ourselves. So that transition from all the facilities around the world essentially running their own software because there wasn't commercially available high-end computer graphic software to do digital visual effects. The industry has matured and we've contributed to that. Some of the software that we've developed has gone on to become widely adopted throughout the industry. Our texture painting software, Mari, is the industry standard, for example. So that's been a maturing, I think, of the industry from being a little bit kind of backroom boffin-ish to being, like I say, more mature, more consolidated. But it's interesting, sometimes things come around full circle, and I see that in the industry as well. This idea that like the original Lord of the Rings trilogy was very much location based. That they shot all over New Zealand. There was like a 15-month shoot for that trilogy, and they went pretty much everywhere in the country. And then both the films that we were making here in New Zealand and Marvel films and other projects that we were involved in became more and more studio based and backlot based. But now it's interesting, like with Chloe, with her success, going more into a location based shooting style again. I see that as the industry coming full circle and just realizing the value of, because audiences are very adept at picking up any sort of artifice, and sometimes it's fine to have that, but other times audiences want to really lose themselves into a world. And so yeah, that's an interesting trend. The watershed thing for our industry really was the switch from productions filming on film to using digital cameras, which happened sort of early in the 21st century. That transition, and when it came, it happened really quickly, because when the technology became available for that, it was such a huge advantage for the film productions as well as for the visual effects teams. Before, right the way through Lord of the Rings and Peter Jackson's King Kong, we shot everything on film, we scanned everything into the computer, did all the visual effects work, and then recorded it back out onto negative again so that it could make its way back into the film. And then, sometime a few years later, we were shooting everything on digital, and it's been fantastic.
Well, it's fantastic work is continuing here on Eternals. So thank you so much. If you're out there watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby and keep up to date with us throughout this season. And Matt, thank you again. It was wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you very much, Sam.